Johnny Sig.
What's going on, brother?
How are you, man? How's everything?
Do- Doing great, man. Feeling so much better, brother. It's so weird how life could take a turn just like that.
Bro, that came out of left field, dude.
Dude, you're telling me I'm at work and I'm like, something's off. Like my
Right.
energy level's down. I always have a tremendous amount of energy.
Yeah.
So I'm like, dude, what's up with this? And by the way, amazing hat. Where'd you get that hat?
Oh, dude, I just bought this at a vintage store down in Orange where my daughter goes to college, dude. It's a ghetto blaster back in the day. I saw
Dude, it's
this thing and I'm
awesome.
like, dude, this has got to come home with me.
Yeah, it's tremendous. So
Yeah,
I'm
it's
at
good.
work and my energy level's down, and then I get a sharp pain on my left side, and I'm like, man, what's up? So I go to the hospital. I have great insurance, and luckily I did. The guy's like, yo, man, you're bleeding inside. You have internal bleeding. You ruptured your spleen, and he's like, did you injure yourself? I box and stuff, but it wasn't that.
Yeah.
I don't recall hitting myself hard at all anywhere.
Mhm.
But they
So
stopped the
you
bleeding.
were
I missed a
internal
couple days
bleeding
of work.
from you were internal from a something happening.
Yeah,
Oh, dude, that's crazy because you don't
something
even
must
know it.
some kind of trauma must have came through.
That's bananas. That's
Isn't that
bananas.
nuts?
Yeah.
My man Vince is coming on.
How are you?
I'm great, man. I'm great. How are you?
Oh, dude, life is good, man. I'm on the West Coast. It's a little gray this morning, but man, it's not too bad. Not too bad.
That's me. I'm up in Encino, California right now. It's like totally gray, but hey, it's California. We can't
I,
complain.
dude, by 11 o'clock, it's gonna be 75 degrees, so it's gonna be gorgeous.
Yeah,
Yeah,
It's
it's
I'm
all
supposed to
in.
be
good.
like 95 degrees here today.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So,
Vegas. In Vegas, you're like 90 degrees.
every
dude,
day.
this
Well,
heat,
I shouldn't
this
say
heat
that.
is awful right now, dude. Like it hit us like so hard. Like as quick as we were just talking about me going to the hospital. Real
Mhm.
quick, I'm
Yeah,
great. Everything's great. We just get that
yeah.
out of the way. One of those like hiccups and like extra attention that was unnecessary. And the only reason why I had to go to social is because I work with so many people. I have 60 clients, and to tell the same story 100 times is a
Right,
pain in the ass. So I
right.
just like put it on public blast. That's it. But I'm glad you guys got to introduce each other. You guys are
Yep.
neighbors.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, Vince, I'm slightly north of you. I'm in
What?
Westlake Village.
Mm,
I mean,
I
literally.
live. I used to live in Westlake. I actually
Yeah.
used to. I'm over in Encino now, but I'm based pretty much out of Venice still, even though I
Oh,
stay
very.
over, still deep in Venice. But yeah, Westlake used to be my stomping ground, man.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy. Venice used to be mine. I grew up in Santa Monica.
Oh hell yeah! All right.
Yeah, dude. So obviously it's changed. It's been gentrified and all that. What you
Oh,
could
so,
get back in
so
the day, you're not even remotely close to getting these days.
I was hanging out with Tony Alva last
Yeah.
week,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he was even saying he's like, the biggest misconception was is that we were all from Venice. No, we were like from Santa Monica, Ocean Park. But he
Yeah.
says still, even from where we used to hang out in Santa Monica all the way down to Venice, it's changed. It's so, like you said, it's gentrified now, and it's
Yeah.
sad because you still see some of the markets there and the houses there that were back in the '70s and the
Hmm.
'60s, and then they're sitting next to like a $4 million box.
Yeah.
That's what terrible.
Yeah. It is. It
The
is.
contrast in California when I was out there a couple of times, the experiences I had is the contrast is amazing. How you got, like you were saying, Vince, the old school properties with the
Mhm.
new school properties. The contrast is so crazy. You could totally see the difference between the 60s structures compared to like the modern. The modern out
Mhm.
here in Vegas, we're building like crazy. De La Hoya just sold his house for 20 million.
Oh
He
gosh.
bought it
Wow.
for
I,
16. He flipped it for 20. He bought another piece of property. Everybody's buying property in Vegas right now. It's the new Hollywood.
You're right. It's been and part of the biggest exodus at first, it was a lot of the rockers and musicians were leaving Hollywood and the Sunset Strip and going to Nashville. A
Yeah.
lot of the actors like Mark Wahlberg, Nick Cage, all those guys, they were going to Vegas. So I think Vegas and Nashville have slowly become, and Atlanta for TV, obviously with
Yeah.
big shows and everything. I think for music and entertainment wise, yeah, Hollywood is not it anymore, man. It's definitely not number one. I can tell you that right now. I mean,
Well,
this is
that's
still, you got to come here. If you're going to be on anything big, it starts here.
Yeah.
But yeah, places are hitting really big lately.
well, that's the perfect
Well,
segue, Vince, to talk about, your roots where you come from, originally from the East Coast, correct?
Yeah, I'm originally from Jersey City.
no
Well,
kidding,
yeah, well,
Vince.
I was born in
I'm
I
just
was born
kidding, dude.
in Plainfield Hospital. And then I was adopted out of Jersey City. And then I was raised in Sayreville, New Jersey,
Oh,
right
cool.
by Bon Jovi, like maybe like 5 minutes down the road from where he grew up.
Wow.
At Sayreville, South Amboy, right on the border. And we had so many talented people come out of there. In the 70s, you had Tom Kelly, who managed the Minnesota Twins to the World Series in
Yeah,
1908. And then
Yeah.
you had Ian, who beat the Yankees with the Marlins in 2003.
Wow.
Was it 2003? Yeah, when the Yankees, 2003 when the Yankees lost to the Marlins. He's also from my hometown. So you had the two coaches of the World Series teams, Bon Jovi. I mean, it's a small little town. And of course, Skid Row came out of there.
And of course, Vince Caruso.
There
And
you
of course,
go.
so many guys came out of my town. Like I'm just finding out, Matt Pinfield,
Of course.
the DJ. He went to high school with me. I didn't even know this, or he went to my high school.
Ironically, Vince, he's going to be on the show next month.
Get out, yeah.
He's coming on the week after Chris Jericho comes on.
Matt Pinfield, yeah, him and another guy. The guy who's the host of that liberal show, The Young Turks. His name is Cenk Unger.
Okay.
I guess he grew up down the street from me. I didn't even know it. I had no idea. I don't know the guy, but yeah, that's what I told.
We got some of the best food, best culture, right? Over on the East Coast, and you made your way over to the West Coast to great success. I mean, where do we begin, Vince? I mean, my two favorite worlds are combat sports and, obviously music. You have a great career in both. Where would you like to begin, Vince? What started your path towards, your passions, which is combat sports and music? Where would you like to begin with that?
The truth, Johnny, I fell into both of them. That's not what my motivation was. I wanted to be in radio. And I was making $150 a week in 1993 at a little radio station, KWSB. It was on a college campus, Western State College in Gunnison, Colorado. I mean, the biggest attraction in the town was the Walmart. I mean, it was a small granola town. It was all granola back in 93.
Yeah.
Like everybody back then, it was all Fish. Remember, the group Fish?
Yeah.
Big, college kids, really hippie. I mean, I think the only African Americans we had at school were on the football team. And so it was like they approached me and said, hey, I know you're a heavy metal guy. You like heavy metal, but you're from the East Coast, and we really need, for diversity, we need an R&B and rap guy. Everybody here likes Widespread Panic and Fish and stuff like that. They're like, what can you do? And I'm like, well, I know Public Enemy, I know NWA, I know Eric B. and Rakim, and LL Cool J. That's about the extent. And Run DMC. That's about the extent of my rap. But I'll do it, absolutely. So I remember my first show, it went pretty good. And they said, well, why don't you mix it up? We need people to listen. Why don't you get somebody to come on the show like Johnny, you do? You get guests on your show. Now, this is 1993 when there was no cell phones, videos, internet, nothing. There was a vinyl album that we had there, and it was Eazy E. It's on 187. Dr. Dre, his response to Dr. Dre's The Chronic. And on the back, I'm reading the credits. And on the back, it says, for booking inquiries, call Jerry Heller, Ruthless Records, 818, blah, 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 blah. Numbers clear as day. And if you look at all of the NWA former albums in the cassettes and the albums, it'll have the old Ruthless phone number in there. Wow. In the Valley, in Woodland Hills. We were right down the street in Woodland Hills. So here I was at this small college, 100 watts. I mean, maybe I had 5 listeners on a good day. And there was usually the guys that were in the gym working out. So what happened is I get a call. Hey, this is Keisha Anderson from Ruthless Records. I see a call back here. You were looking to get Eazy on your show. So her and I start talking. And she says, you have an East Coast accent. You're not from Colorado. Where are you from? I said, well, I'm from Jersey. She said, so am I. She says, what part of Jersey? I said, no, Central Jersey. She said, I'm from Newark. And then she goes, you might know my dad. Like I'm telling her about my family history. My uncle, Al Caruso, great featherweight under Cus D'Amato. So back when Cus had the Gramercy gym, way back.
Yeah.
So she says, well, my dad was in the boxing business. He was Muhammad Ali's bodyguard. His name was Big Jim Anderson. And she goes, my brother is a top 5 recruit in the NCAA right now. His name is Jamal Anderson, the running back who eventually went to the Falcons and did the dirty. Says, oh, okay. So we have the New Jersey connection. Next thing you know, Keisha says, I got you. No problem. Now, usually when you called up radio stations back then, they wanted you to fax over your demographics, meaning how many listeners do you have? How many watts do you have? Things like that. I could not get I wanted to get Vince Neil from Motley Crue on. I couldn't do it. I wanted to get Sebastian, who, I used to not hang out with those guys, but hang around the scene. I was their last show before Bon Jovi took them. I was at that in Red Bank, New Jersey. Couldn't get Sebastian on the show. So it was like I was stuck between a rock and a hard. I wanted Axl Rose. Couldn't get Axl Rose on the show. So sure enough, she calls me back. She's like, listen, I'll make it happen. Eazy called me up. We did the interview. At the end of the interview, he says, hey, man, you ever come to L.A.? Here's my number. Give me a call. I never had any celebrity do that to me. And I was meeting celebrities, when we were kids waiting outside of the Ranger games in New York City to meet Mark Messier and everybody. I never had a celebrity or an athlete give me their phone number. I'm thinking, yeah, whatever. Fast forward. There was a strike, NHL strike that year, 1993-94. Buddy of mine, Nick Kyprios, played for Washington. He says, hey, man, I'm coming out to L.A. Meet me out there. We'll party. We'll hang out. I'm thinking, all right, great. This is awesome, right? They're on strike. I have tickets to L.A., no hockey going on. I don't know anybody outside my cousins in Cyprus down the road by Disneyland. So what do? I take a piece of paper. I got Eazy E's number. Let me give him a call. I called him from a payphone outside of LAX.
Whoa, dude.
A payphone. He's like, who's this? It's cousin Vinny. Remember you did the interview with me? Oh, yeah. Colorado. Yeah. He's like, where you at? You at the airport? I said, yeah. He goes, I'll be right there. Where you at? This is number 1. He goes, I'll be there in 20 minutes. Well, 20 minutes to Eazy E was 3 hours. I was sitting here at LAX. Now, mind you, I landed in the midday. It was beautiful outside, palm trees. I'm coming from snow. And I'm thinking this is around Halloween of 93. And I'm like, yo, I got stood up by Eazy E. I'm like, I got ghosted by Eazy E at the airport. My bags. I'm like, at least I got a story to tell. Hey, man, I got blown off by Eazy E.
Right.
Man, I am literally, and if I'm lying, I'm dying. I was 10 minutes away from just calling a cab, going down to the Motel 6 right there in Century where I was staying, and just staying for the 3 days, getting back on a plane and going home. I'm thinking, if anything, I'll get on a bus and go see the Hollywood sign. Man, all of a sudden, I see this Mercedes 550 SL, grayed out with tinted windows. I mean, boom, boom. You know how the bass used to shake? Boom.
Yeah.
Getting closer. Boom. I'm like, oh, this got to be him. The car's, it's about 25 yards away from me. I hear Eric had no brakes. He refused to get his car done. His brakes, he would have to pump it. The brakes would, this guy's worth $60 million, and he can't get his brakes fixed. He has no time to get his brakes fixed. He's pumping the brakes. He slides right in front of me. It's like right out of a movie. You can't make this. The windows roll down. The window rolls down. Weed smoke. Now, I don't smoke weed at the time. Weed smoke pouring out of the Mercedes. Here's this dude with a little White Sox hat on. He's like, Vinny, gets in the car. He's on the phone. He's doing this. He's driving. He's on the phone. He's writing, and he's telling me coming, and he's got a blunt on his lap. This is how this dude was the ultimate multitasker. So anyway, that's what happened. We were hanging out. I thought, hey, Eric, you know what? I'm just here for 3 days. I'm going to go back to college. Man, thanks for hanging out with me. He let me stay in his house. He's like, fuck going back to that hotel, man. We stayed at his house in Mulholland. And I mean, he was just showing me crazy things like the Chucky doll that he had from Chucky 2. He loved Chucky. He was obsessed with Chucky. Yeah. He had the actual doll from Chucky 2 in his house. I mean, I saw that actual doll. I'm like, holy shit. Yeah, he was real into the dark stuff, Eric was. I mean, don't get me wrong, I believed in God, but he was into like the supernatural, that kind of stuff, like really Ouija board, digging up graves, like really some deep, dark stuff. Yeah. But he loved Chucky. So like all these things, I'm like, wow, man, I'm hanging out with Eazy E. So I'm like, hey, man, one night, Saturday night, by the way, you figure we would be out at the clubs, right? Fridays and Saturday nights, hanging out, taking me out. No, dude, no. We were in Norwalk at, or El Segundo, I think, at Julio G's house. he's in Cypress Hill now. Julio G is their guy, who was Eric's producer. And we hung out there. I think we went out at 3:00 in the morning to get Carl's Jr. We sat in his car for a little bit. We're looking at the rap pages of all the hot rapper chicks. And he's like, yeah, screw her. I want to screw her. And it's funny because he'd be like, hey, who you want to call? And I'd say, I don't know, let's call KRS-One. He'd pick up the phone and call him. And I'd be like, holy God, like we'd be like two guys, like big brother, little brother.
Yeah.
And then he said to me, he said, look, man, he says, I got 22 acts on Ruthless. Did you know that? I go, no. I said, I just knew Above the Law and MC Ren and, CPO, but they left. He's like, I got 22 acts and Sony won't move any of them. They only want to move my catalog.
Wow.
So I said, okay, I got a solution. He says, what? I said, College Music Radio. It's free. All you got to do, I said, Eric, send him an autograph, do an interview like you did for me. These people will eat out of your hands. And there's no difference between a UCLA radio station that has 10,000 watts and a public radio station that has 10,000 watts. You both hit the same audience. He was like, you're a genius. He's like, I tell you what, I'll never forget this. I go, can you bring me to the airport in the morning? He goes, tell you what, man, why don't you come to work for me? He says, I'll give you $500 a week. That's like making 1,000 this week, I guess. He's like, I'll give you tax-free, $500 a week. I'll let you stay in my crib, and I want you to hit the ground running with that idea on Monday. Man, I was like, pinch me now. And I was like, I was like, whoa. Remember, I'm a high school dropout with a 10th grade education. I had no college at the time. I had a GED. That was it. That was all. My jobs before this, I was a dishwasher at a Mexican restaurant in New Jersey, Chi-Chi's. I was a bar back for a bartender. I worked at a radio station for $1.50 a week, and I was a gym attendant at like a Gold's Gym in Colorado. But it wasn't Gold's; it was another gym. Those were my jobs. That was going to be my life. I was going to be a proverbial loser. Now, it doesn't mean I'm not talented. It just means I screwed off life. I screw school. I learned through traveling and things like that. So that was it. Eric started me in the business. I was with him up until the day he died. Of course, you know what happened. March of 1995, I'm scared to death. He dies. All of a sudden, the bank seizes his home that I'm living in. Beautiful $4 million home. I'm homeless. So I'm like, what do I do? Thank God I made such great connections with him. I actually stayed. There was a friend of his that I met through Duff McKagan and his wife at the time. That really great guy, a rocker kind of guy, worked with both Guns N' Roses and NWA, who, by the way, were very tight, very, very close. Both groups were. Right. And up staying at his guest house. And then I met this chick with a lot of money who was older. So, hey, sugar mama, I'm gone. But boxing. So 5 months after Eric died, I'm bored as hell. I start going to the forum with one of the Ruthless attorneys that we had for Bone Thugs and Harmony. He was friends with Dr. Jerry Buss at the forum. And the night that I'm there, it was 1995, the end of 95. I saw this young guy, and his name was Marco Barrera. And I said, this guy is going to be a superstar. And the guys next to me said, no, he's not. And I said, why would you say that? I said, he just murderized this guy. He can fight. The guy's 18 years old. He's a superstar. He said, can't speak a lick of English. Nobody is going to buy this kid in America. Remember, this is the 90s, not as diverse as we are today. If you spoke English, you had your Telemundo, and that was it. I watched this guy. I just knew. And I started hanging out. The biggest thing is people think I worked for Marco. I didn't. If anything, I did jobs for Ricardo Maldonado, who was his manager. I didn't work for Marco Barrera. I was just part of that amazing team. It was just great to be with him through the training camps and Nassim Hamed and Eric Morales. And I really saw what a champion's heart was. But unfortunately, these are great times I'm talking about with Eazy E and which I learned a lot from Eazy. Yeah. With Marco, a different story. I was on drugs. I wasn't on drugs when I was with Eazy. I was on drugs when I was with Marco. I was popping pills at a very alarming rate. I treated his his worth and his stardom as it was mine. Like it was like being in a rock band. And,
Oh, wow.
you got your lead singer and then you got your 8 band members. Well, that was me. And it was just like, I kept trying because I spoke English, and a lot of the people that wanted to talk to Marco didn't speak Spanish. Like a lot of the reporters, of course, they're going to come to me. So it almost like it was like you always, when Marco came to the ring, you saw Oscar Maldonado on his left side and you saw me on his right side.
Yeah.
And I just took it under my wing to do anything for the guy. He was a great guy. He is a great guy.
I always saw you as an advisor, like you're highly intelligent. Whatever they do with the water over there in Jersey, right, Jimmy? With this guy Vince over here, man. I got some of that water, but Jimmy, let me tell you something. I borrow a page from this guy's book, Vince's book, big time, man. He is great. The gift of the gab on this guy, stellar, sensational.
You got to stop, Johnny, because you and I are from the same tree, really. I mean, we survive. It's not that we don't have the talent and we don't have the ability to formulate something great, anything, whether show, whether it be even with a fighter or a professional athlete, how to guide their careers. I did that later on with other athletes.
Right.
It's just, the thing is that, to be honest with you, it's nothing that I made it my passion. And I'm glad I didn't, because all of that lifestyle, like with Eazy, I learned the streets. I learned the hustle. I learned how to be a pirate through Eazy E. I applied it in other settings. But the problem is where I applied it, it wasn't a street thing. And I was really burning a lot of bridges. My behavior was a drug addict's behavior. I was doing things. Respectfully, I loved Marco. I loved his family, but I was just a cancer to have around. I mean, sometimes people are great people to have around. But if they have demons and they're going through alcoholism and they're going through drugs or they're going through any type of addiction, could be a gambling addiction, they're not themselves. And I had a great time with Marco. After the second Eric Morales fight, there was a lot of dissension in the camp. There was a guy that they was hanging around who was just a fan, who later on became somebody in boxing that I didn't like. I voiced my opinion of that. It created a wedge. And Marco and those guys will say that I left. I say that I was fired. But it is what it is. I wish them the best. But after that, I went into promoting some on my own. And then I just let boxing go. I'm not going to lie. And maybe that could lead into our next conversation of where boxing is today, Johnny.
I would love that. And again, great minds think the same. I tell you what, Vince, I was going there, segueing into the conversation in that direction. Jimmy, did you see the last Canelo fight at all?
No, but I heard that he destroyed that dude.
Yeah, he looked great. The state of boxing right now is pretty darn good. We got Canelo just beat Jaime Munguia in a very good fight. Now they're talking today, Vince, that Canelo might face one of the best fighters. You were working with Barrera when the best were facing the best. HBO Boxing After Dark. Remember that series?
Amazing.
Boxing After Dark, man. Lou DiBella's baby. That was a great show on HBO.
The greatest Lou DiBella is a genius.
Absolutely.
That was the greatest vehicle ever. First show we ever had. First Boxing After Dark. Lou DiBella. Remember, I told you back in the 90s, Spanish fighters fought on Telemundo. Jerry Buss was the only one that featured Spanish fighters on a constant basis. Lou DiBella went to Seth Abraham and said, I got this idea. We're going to the West Coast. I'm bringing an East Coast black African-American fighter to the West Coast to fight a Hispanic Mexican-American fighter in California. It was almost like a silent version of Holmes and Cooney because of the difference between black and brown. Lou DiBella saw that, put it in a place that it would thrive. And if you go back on YouTube, I challenge anyone, go back on YouTube and you watch that fight with Kennedy McKinney versus Marco Antonio Barrera. Don't look at the fighters. Don't look at the referee. Look at the crowd. Look at the crowd. That's all I'm saying. And then you'll fights where I come from, where I was born. That was my birth into boxing. That fight, I was there. And that blew me away because that's what started it for me. And then do you remember what the next Boxing After Dark was after that? It was Barrera, Kennedy, McKinney. And what was the next Boxing After Dark? Do you remember?
Was it Gotti, Wilson, Rodriguez?
Johnny for the win. Johnny, ring the bell. We got a winner. Wilson.
Yeah,
Gotti in the small room in Madison Square Garden. Boxing After Dark took off. It was a great, great vehicle. It worked. It was awesome. But you know what? We're never going to see those days again. I know you're talking about Canelo. Ryan Garcia just had a great fight. I know we had Tyson Fury coming up. But I want you to go back and I want you to look at the quality from the 90s. Everyone talks about the and all the big four. I'm saying the 90s, because that was the transition where mid-decade we had the internet introduced. We had different things introduced, but yet fighters didn't change. Fighters didn't change until social media came along. That's when the fight game changed, not when the internet came along. Because 1995 to 2003, we had some really good fights.
Yeah, we
had
still
some
did.
really pro wrestling, same thing. WWE Attitude Era, The Rock, Stone Cold, Shawn Michaels. That you can't script a better period in time. When was it? Same time that boxing was thriving. Now look at wrestling today. Don't get me wrong, some beautiful women, and I love the women's wrestling today. They're doing great. I think the angles are amazing with Ric Flair's daughter, Bianca Belair, Jade Cargill. I love that stuff, but it doesn't come close to what WrestleMania was hitting like in the 90s with The Rock and Triple H in that ladder match in Madison Square Garden. Stone Cold. I mean, it just you can't reach that. Did we in the 90s? That's why I'm I don't want to say negative, but I'm turned off to today's product, because the product today, it is, how can I say this? Jake Paul's not a boxer. Okay, he's not. Just as Mark Gastineau from the New York Jets was never a boxer. And the minute that he got in there with the boxer, he got knocked out. As you can see, there are a lot of guys that have tried it. Maybe Alonzo Highsmith, good friend of mine, promoted one of his fights, former running back for the Houston Oilers and Miami Hurricanes. Great guy, built like a brick house. 24-0 was great. Put him on a card. He lost to a guy who was 5-11.
Yeah.
Again, I like seeing them do that on an amateur level with headgear and big gloves. That's great. Like a fight night. You want to do it for charity? Great. But to get in that ring, you don't play boxing. You don't fake boxing. Boxing's not a role. But it has been reduced so people like that can come in and perform on a scripted WWF 1980s style level, which Mike Tyson, who I lost tremendous amounts of respect for. Very little respect left for Mike Tyson. Very little respect left for him. I respect men more like Larry Holmes, who for many years could have come out and done something like that. Fought. In fact, he was 48 years old, retired, invested his money well, and doesn't make a bozo out of himself. Larry Holmes isn't out there challenging 26-year-old YouTubers. Greatest heavyweight champion that ever lived, through his actions. Mike Tyson, it used to be. He not a has-been. He's a used to be. You used to be feared. You used to be respected. Now you're a social media plug.
A lot of things that used to be, you hit on really good there with Boxing After Dark and the best facing the best. Like, that's where I was going with the Canelo Jaime Munguia fight. That's an okay fight. The best facing the best would have been Benavidez or Crawford. They're actually talking about maybe Canelo and Crawford today. Now, Jimmy, you're a boxing fan, but you didn't see that fight probably because you had better things to do that night. Like a lot of people that like boxing, because that's not the fight that the public wants. You could have been golfing, been out with your family, your beautiful family. It takes a lot for people to be invested in the sport of boxing nowadays because there's so much going on in the sport. Side hustles like the Tyson Paul fight, which is good in some ways and bad in some ways. The best not facing the best. Ryan Garcia out there talking about, people getting raped and all this stuff that goes on in Hollywood, losing his mind before the fight. People are like, Johnny, what's going on with boxers? Does he have CTE already? What's up with your sport? Why is everyone so nuts in your sport? I never understand what I'm watching. What are the judges doing with the scorecards? You always have to explain so much about a fight. It shouldn't be that hard. Whenever you watch a boxing match, now I'm going to go on a rant. Say a casual fan will come up to you at work on Monday. Be like, John, what was that one rule with that? How come they couldn't go to a replay and that one judge scored it there on a technicality? And how come this was overturned and that person's not allowed to hit this person when? It's like you have to explain more of the fight than you actually get to witness and enjoy it in the moment. You spend more time talking about it than actually enjoying it, building it up. The pre-fight, the post-fight, all this opinions, all these people. It's like, what happened to two guys getting in the ring? Gotti
Yeah.
Ward balls, nuts and guts, swinging for the fences. Let's go. Vince hit it on the head. The crowd. You watch the crowd during a Gotti fight, Boxing After Dark, you see all Italian mafiosos screaming, jumping, going crazy. You know what's going on in that fight just by looking at the audience. Wow.
Well, you know what, Johnny, real quick on
the
to touch on that, I agree with you. I used to be a bigger fan back in the day when fighting was actually fighting. You know, now it's just a circus, as Vince touched on and you touched on briefly. It's a circus. But you know what? The unfortunate part about that is it sells. That's because of social media. People just want to see this like in and out sort of deal. So yeah, I get it. I'm excited about what the way that the sport is, because the athletes are still super athletes, man. And it's really cool to see these guys getting after it. You know,
Jimmy, you're onto something right there with the super athletes.
Yeah.
Big time. These kids are scary, right, Vince?
You know, I want to touch on something you just said, and I like it. And Johnny, by the way, I couldn't have scripted a better rant than what you just made, by the way. You took Meatloaf, you took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah.
Honest with you, what you just said makes a lot of sense. And here's something that I remember. Paul Heyman, genius. Paul Heyman, great wrestling guy, great mind. Him and Jim Cornette, I think, are the two biggest geniuses in the business of professional wrestling. If you remember what Paul did with ECW, remember how you had I like to call the Doink the Clown era of the WWF, where it was just like unbelievable made up characters like the Minute, like that. Yeah. And in WCW was just nothing but a lot of old WWF guys that were passed. Yeah. So what Paul did was he introduced ECW. And with ECW, you had guys that were like Mick Foley, mid-card guys, old veterans like Terry Funk, that were having these amazing brawls with barbed wire and chairs and tables. And it was a new extreme wrestling product. Now, I do think that we can have a reboot of boxing that same way. It is going to take a promoter that's going to have to do it for the love of boxing and not the love of their pocket. I know both, like an oxymoron, but I promise you, if you do it for the love of boxing on the front end, the back end will take care of your pocket. I think what needs to happen is you need to have a promoter that's going to come in there and take kids that aren't on social media, these kids that are like 4-0, 5-0, 6-0. I used to go down to Tijuana and pull them up there for my opponent because these guys would kill for $100.
Right.
I get just no name, no frills guys that don't have social media accounts that are fighting to put food in their mouths and their families' mouths. And you get a card like that where you get two guys just beating the crap out of each other. No one's going to give a crap about who they are. No one's going to care about how many followers they have. No one's even going to look and see if they have a social media account, because what goes on in that ring is going to be such a purist sport. And that's what needs to happen. It needs to be blood and guts in boxing, because right now this is unbelievable. The millions and millions of dollars. And now I hate to say this, and I'll take it one way because I got to get on out of here soon. Yeah. I will take that really bothers me about boxing. And I am going to say it, regardless of what people think. You can't cancel me because I ain't got shit to cancel. I'm going to tell you this. I think it's disgusting. We live in the greatest country of the world. I've had brothers die on that battlefield for the freedoms that we have in this country. And yet we're bending over for the Saudis now. The way that they're coming in and they're taking over American sports, it's disgusting. It is absolutely disgusting that this guy from Saudi Arabia is coming here to America in Los Angeles, our backyard, and is promoting a fight that American promoters like Bob Arum and Don and Dan Goosen, the late Dan Goosen, and everybody else couldn't get done because of their egos or whatever.
You're on to something, yep.
Exactly, that was going to happen. And the Saudis, they've already taken over golf. They're going to take over the NBA.
UFC.
They've taken over the UFC. All your fights are in Saudi Arabia. What happened to the American boxing fan? I don't want to hear
over there.
That's all it is. But what we left all these fighters in America that stopped doing it. They left it so the only way that people will fight A1 is if the money is absolutely absurd and egregiously high and wrong. And that's what's happening. And that's what they did. they've now boxing is going to need to be destroyed and built back up because you've made the salaries now, especially with this Saudi oil money, they've made this incredibly, incredibly, incredibly high, where you're not going to fight. And they're going to say, well, you're not going to give me $9 million for a fight I'm only worth $1 million for. I'm not going to fight. I have 1 million followers on social media. I'll just entertain them and sell merchandise and make money and have all my fans intact.
That's what it is.
So I just want to leave you with that, because I do got to run, because believe it or not, I'm at work. And
you got it.
So gracious to let me do this interview. I told her it's for Johnny Sig, my guy on the rock line. It's got to happen, and we made it happen.
Listen,
I want to, guys, we got to do it again when I have more time.
Yeah, I know. Absolutely, Vince, you're the best.
Window here, but man, you guys are the best. When I get more time, let's do this, because we got so much to talk about, and I love you guys so much. And Johnny,
absolutely,
you got it, Vince. Thank you so much, brother.
I love you,
man.
Man. Have a great day.
Later, brother.
All the best.
You got it, Jimmy. Thanks for hanging tight, brother. Everything's been well,
dude. Everything's amazing, man. We got so much to catch up on. I could listen to that dude for hours.
Vince is awesome.
Later,
I'll catch up with you soon, bud.
Will do, pal.
Thanks, pal.